Talk to our friend Jonathan Wachtel about all of this, who joins us now. Has been following foreign policy for a long time, and we'll get away from whether you've seen anything like this before. I don't know that anyone has necessarily exactly like this, but Niall Stanage, who I was talking to a few minutes ago, brought up an interesting point. He's like, what's the practical impact of it? Say the U.S. is really out on negotiations with Ukraine. Does Europe pick up the slack? Is Zelenskyy just out of luck? Where do you see this going?
Yeah, this certainly is going not in a direction that the Ukrainians would want to see it going, and certainly not a way that Western Europe and Eastern Europe would want to be seeing this going. So this is really a bizarre twist in what has been a very painful war, a very tragic situation, and high hopes that maybe we were heading in a direction of some sort of settlement that would allow the guns to quiet and for Europe to heal, and for these two nations, in this brutal battle to quiet the guns and heal themselves. It's terrible where we are right now.
It seems there's a decent amount of domestic politics involved in this, and you wonder what the impact kind of geopolitically of that is. Like, for example, J.D. Vance today, the vice president, and when he spoke up, and he was focused on the fact that Zelenskyy hadn't said thank you in that meeting. Of course, Ukrainians have thanked the U.S. for the help many, many times over the years, but this is our clip number 13 that we have with Vance. Let's play that, and then we'll come back and talk about what the impact of that is. Here's the vice president.
In this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
How's that seen around the world? I don't know that maybe whether people here care or not, Jonathan, but I saw some commentary today to say, well, who's thanking who? Should we be thanking, and should Western Europe also be thanking the Ukrainians for stopping Russia where they did, essentially, and not allowing them to roll into Poland, for example?
Right. So, Shane, you asked the right questions. I mean, look, are we looking at this through the lens of what has been decades of adversarial relations between Moscow and the United States, of the United States trying to contain in the Cold War days communism and the attempt by the Soviet Union to pull as many nations under their sway and try to actually eradicate the United States? I mean, truly, that goal in those days certainly was to make sure that the United States was a diminished power and to be the world superpower. That's what the Soviet Union was about. That's the nation that Vladimir Putin served as a KGB officer. And that is the nation that Vladimir Putin misses and talks about frequently, of being such a tragedy that it dissolved in 1991. And he has made it his quest to ensure that Moscow has as much sway in its near abroad, and that's what they call any country that's not within Russia. But in the case of Ukraine, in the case of the Baltic states, of Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, in the case of the Czech Republic, these are parts of what Vladimir Putin sees as the Soviet Union, the superpower that he believed in, grew up with, wants to see returned, and very much wants to see Ukraine fall under the sway of Moscow again. So
there's a question then, because a lot of people that support President Trump, understandably, are going to be focused on the short term to say that Zelenskyy hurt himself today. You have to know how to deal, I've heard, with President Trump when you're coming in, if you want to make a deal, and he didn't do that. Okay, that's one side of it. The other side of it is, what impact did Trump have on our interests, the United States interests today? Does the United States come out of this stronger or weaker, possibly more isolated in the world? And if so, is there an impact of all of that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, one thing that Zelenskyy was trying to express in that room that we saw play out with such drama today, and he was shut down as he tried to do it, it was a slapdown essentially, was that if you give to Vladimir Putin, if you give to the war machine of the Kremlin right now, then you'll feel the reverberations of that in the United States. Now, he was told, Zelenskyy was told that's not the case, and how dare you make such a remark, and the United States will position itself and do what it wants. And we'll see how history plays out here. But certainly European nations are well aware of how things have gone with Moscow over the decades, certainly. Right. All you have to do is speak to Hungarians, and they'll tell you about how they were invaded by the Soviets. Speak to the Czechs, they'll tell you how they were invaded in the 60s. Speak to the Baltic states that I mentioned. Speak to all the former Soviet republics. They'll speak about how the Soviet Union was this expansionist Russian empire enterprise, and they have concerns that we're heading in that direction again.
Thanks so much for watching. Just go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.